boys and girls. It's clock day. Did you get your clock? Okay, if you didn't, I want you to pause Mrs. Card and go get it. Okay, welcome back. We're going to talk about the parts of a clock. Okay, there's some important parts to a clock to help you tell the time. And the first thing you're going to look at is talk about the numbers. Okay, the numbers start at 1 and go all the way around to 12. Okay, the other important parts are the hands. Okay, the little hand, on my clock it's red, is the hour hand. So it keeps track of the hours. The big hand is the minute hand. It keeps track of the minutes. Okay, so those are the important parts of the clock. Maybe you notice on Mrs. Card's clock that I have blue numbers and dots too, and I'll tell you why. It's because these red numbers are the hour numbers, and they match the hour hand on my clock. These blue numbers and these blue dots stand for minutes, so they match the minute hand on my clock. Okay, so when I want to tell the hour, I look at the red numbers. When I want to tell the minutes, I look at the blue numbers. Okay? Now, the first thing you need to do for your math workbook, your pages in your math book is, this is super easy. All you do is fill in the missing numbers. So make sure you have your clock with you to help you put the numbers in the right spot. Okay? Because as you go along, they take more numbers away, so that means you have to write more numbers on the clock. Now, when you get down to here, there's nothing there to help you. Can I tell you the easiest way to do it? Start with 12 at the top. I'm going to do it and show you. Then put 6 at the bottom. So here's what I have so far. Can you see it? 12 at the top, 6 at the bottom. Then I would do 3 and 9. Can you see that, boys and girls? And then I would fill in the other numbers. Start there, and then that will make the rest will be easier for you. Okay, now we're going to learn one kind of time today. We're going to learn how to tell the time when it's an o'clock time. Okay, and I have an example here of what an o'clock time looks like on a clock with numbers. Okay, when you're telling the time, you always look at the little hand first, which is the red hand on Mrs. Card's clock. Okay, the little hand he's the little guy. He's the underdog. He needs to feel important. So we always look at the little hand first. And the little hand should be pointing at the 7 for this time. Okay, now you might be saying to yourself, what are the zeros for, Mrs. Card? Because there are no zeros on a clock. You're right. The zeros, when you're telling time, when you want to say this time, stand for o'clock. So the way that you would say this time is 7 o'clock. The 7 stands for what the hour hand is pointing at, and the 2 zeros stand for what the minute hand is pointing at. And I'll show you what that means in a second. What I also want to point out to you is that there's always 2 dots between the hour and the minutes. Okay, that's really important. Hour, double dots, minutes. And then, boys and girls, I also wrote the words o'clock because you'll see that on your seat work today. When you see the words o'clock, it means 00 when you want to write the time with numbers. Okay? And I've actually set my clock to 7 o'clock. Okay? So this time, the way it's written, matches the hands on the clock. Why? Because the hour hand needs to point to the 7. Remember, we always read the little hand first because he's the poor little underdog. He's little. And then we go to the big hand, which is pointing at the 12. Oh, because when the minute hand points at the 12, that means o'clock. And I have a little song that goes with that. It goes like this. When the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock. See? When the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock. When the minute hand's on the 12, when the minute hand's on the 12, when the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock. So how do I read the time when I'm looking at a clock with hands? Look at the hour hand first, the little hand, because he needs to feel important. And notice it's pointing at 7. So it's 7 something. What's the big hand pointing at? 12. It's not 7:12. That's not the time. No, no. When the big hand, the minute hand, is pointing at the 12, it says o'clock. So the time is 7 o'clock. Okay, see how I wrote it down? 7 o'clock. All right? Okay. What's that time? Can you say that time to Mrs. Card? 9 o'clock. Okay, now I want you to take your clock and set your hands to the time 9 o'clock. So the first thing you're going to do is set the little hand because he needs to feel important. And he is the hour hand, so he's pointing at the 9. So make your little hand point at the 9. And then what's the minute hand going to do? Well, the time is 9 o'clock. So how do we make the minute hand say o'clock? We point it at the 12. Does your clock say 9 o'clock? See the words underneath, o'clock? Let's see. Keep it there. Don't change it. Watch me change my time. My clock's pretty cool because you move the minute hand and the hour hand moves at the same time. There's 9 o'clock, boys and girls. So did you make your little hand point at the 9 and your big hand point at the 12 to say o'clock? So what do I say when I look at the clock? Like this, I look here first. Okay, red hand, red number, 9. Blue hand keeps track of the minutes. Don't say 9:12, no, because when the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock, so it's 9 o'clock. How do I write that? Where did it go? 9, double dots, 00 means o'clock. Okay, let's do another one. I'm going to get one that's a little bit easier because look what I did for this one. 11 o'clock. So Mrs. Carter is showing you, set your clock so that the little hand, which keeps track of the hours, is pointing at the 11. Can you do that? And then set your big hand so it's saying o'clock. Well, where do I put that? There's no zeros. Oh, remember, when the big hand points at the 12, it says o'clock. When the big hand's on the 12, it says o'clock. You can say big hand or minute hand. So it goes hours, minutes, 11 o'clock. Okay, now we're going to do it on Mrs. Card's clock. Watch. I'm going to move the minute hand. The minute hand moves quick. But did you notice how slow the hour hand moves? That's because hours are much longer than minutes. We're almost there. I have to make the hour hand be on the 11 and the minute hand be on the 12. There's 11 o'clock. Does your clock match Mrs. Card's clock? 11 o'clock. When the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock, o'clock. Okay, remember that. So set the hour hand first, because he's the little guy. We want him to feel important. And then set big bossy minute hand on the 12 for o'clock. Okay, let's try this one. 8 o'clock. So you're going to set the hour hand first, which is the little hand, pointing at the 8. And you're going to set the big hand next, big bossy minute hand. And he needs to say o'clock, but there's no zeros on the clock. How do you get the big hand to say o'clock? Put it on the 12. So the time your clock should say is 8 o'clock. Did you set it for that? I'll show you on my clock. Now I have to go a long way around because I got to get this hour hand all the way over to here to make it say 8 o'clock. And I always move the hands in this direction. This is called clockwise. Have you ever heard anybody say turn clockwise? That's talking about the direction that the hands on a clock move. Hands on a clock never go this way. That's backwards. Time always goes forward. Oh, we're getting closer to 8. Oh, we're just about there. 8 o'clock. So is that what your clock looks like? The little hand, the hour hand, is pointing at the 8. Remember, poor little hour hand. He needs to feel important. So we set him first, 8. And then o'clock, we don't say 8:12. No. When the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock. When the minute hand's on the 12, it says o'clock. Do you get it? You got it, boys and girls? All right, let's try another one. This one is a little bit tricky. This one says, can you say the time? 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. How do you get the clock to say 12 o'clock? Well, the little hand, the hour hand, has to point to the 12. Okay, we set him first. We set the hour hand first. Then we set the big hand. How do I make the big hand, the big bossy minute hand, say o'clock? Set it on the 12. Oh, did you notice something about 12 o'clock? What did you notice? I hope you noticed that both hands are on pointing to the 12. Right now my clock says 8 o'clock. I'm going to keep moving the hands until it says 12 o'clock. 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Can you see what I'm doing, boys and girls? Sorry. 11 o'clock. Oh, I'm getting closer. I think the next hour is 12 o'clock. Look at that. You can't even see poor little hour hand. He's there. There he is, pointing at the 12. Okay, so make sure that for 12 o'clock, both hands are pointing at the 12. Okay, what does that look like when you have a clock with numbers? It looks like this, 12 o'clock. Okay, let's do, what about this one? How do you say that time? I didn't put big or little. Can you still set the clock? 2 o'clock. Can you quickly set it before I do? 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. I have to set the little hand first. 2 o'clock. Okay, is that what you did? Make the little hand, poor little hour hand. Make him be at the 2 for 2, and then o'clock. The big bossy minute hand has to point at the 12. So the time is 2 o'clock. All right, now how about I show you a time and you guess the time? How about, yeah, let's do this one. What's that? Can you see it? So look at the hour hand first. It's pointing at the 5. And the big hand's pointing at the 12, which means o'clock. Don't say 5:12, say 5 o'clock. Like this. 5 o'clock. Good job. Okay. What about, what time is this? Ooh, look, I really have to move. I'm a busy beaver. What time is that? Okay, where do I look first? Poor little hour hand. I have to look here first. And I'm going to say the red number because it matches my red hand. 4 something. What's the big bossy minute hand pointing at? The 12. So the time is 4 o'clock. Okay, what does that look like when I write it down? 4, whoops, double dots, 0, 0, 4 o'clock. Okay, now, when you go to do your seat work page, you already did the one where you had to fill in the missing numbers. So for this one it says, write the time to the hour given on the analog clock. Whoa, analog, what's that mean? That means a clock with hands. When you have a clock with numbers like this, that's a digital clock. So you look at this clock and you say to yourself, what's the time on the clock? Well, they've made it super duper easy. All you have to do is say what the little hand is pointing at because they already wrote the o'clock part. Oh, brother. They already wrote what the big bossy minute hand is saying, o'clock. So all you would have to do is write 11 because the time on the clock is 11 o'clock. Now, if you're really feeling like a smarty pants, you can write the time. So I'm going to do the first one for you. You can write the time as if it were a digital clock. See, that's what I did right there. Can you see it? So here's what it would look like in words, 11 o'clock. Here's what it would look like in numbers on a digital clock. Okay, so go to the next one. All you have to do is look and see what is the hour hand pointing at. Okay, that's what you would write in the blank because they've already told you what the minute hand is saying. Easy breezy, o'clock. So since it's pointing at the 4, you would say 4 o'clock. Okay? Now you go ahead and finish that on your own, and I know you're going to do great. Good job, everybody.